I'm going in. Born to be wild.
Hail to the king, baby. It's Flashback 64. Hey, it's Flashback 64. The chronological Nintendo 64 podcast. I am Gooey, joined as always by McKenna.
Hello.
How's it going?
Good.
Good. I was just saying right before we hit record, a little under the weather, but I'm pretty pumped up about this episode. It was fun. It's been an interesting time. We've been pretty busy.
Yeah.
There's a new Zelda game out too, so.
Yeah, that's been taking our time.
But then I was taking time away from Zelda to just play a ton of Duke Nukem, so it's been a great, interesting time. But let's get our guests in here. First of all, we've got returning to us one of our very favorite guests. We've got our pal Ryan. Hey, buddy.
Hello. I guess I'm the sick one here. Jesus, what is happening? Oh my god, I just got filled with cough. Sorry. Hi, I'm Ryan. Nice to be back.
See, I said I would try not to cough on you guys.
Infected me. Do you think Duke Nukem ever gets sick? And how do you think he acts when he's sick? Oh. I bet he's a huge baby.
You just take some vitamin X.
Vitamin, yeah. Quote unquote vitamin X.
Yeah, not steroids.
Ooh, I needed that. Okay, well, it's great to have you back, Ryan. We always love having you on. And thanks. We are joined by a brand new guest, and we are happy to have Jeremy on the show. Hey, Jeremy.
Hey, how's it going?
Great. Yeah, we're excited to have you on. I guess, one of our very special ways we sort of break the ice with our brand new guests is we just ask them for, their backstory, their history with the Nintendo 64. So, why don't you share that with us?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this a lot in advance of the recording, but I got a Nintendo 64. My brother and I got one for Christmas of 1996. So not right at launch, but pretty soon after that. And I remember at the time, the Nintendo 64 just absolutely blew my mind because, we had a Nintendo, we had Game Boys, we had a PC, and we leapfrogged the Super Nintendo, the 16-bit era, straight into the 64. And I remember very distinctly being at the local Walmart, because that's what we had in the town I grew up in, and they had the little store demo display, and seeing the controller in person for the first time and playing Mario 64 for, I think it was on a 3-minute timer or a 5-minute timer, and just absolutely blew my mind. This, I remember having an experience where I was like, this is the future. Legitimately.
Yeah, I feel that.
Which it kind of was, but it also is sort of a funny thing to think back on. But I just remember, one of the game magazines I subscribed to back in the 90s was Game Players, which was sort of one of the secondary gaming mags in terms of popularity. But, when they made magazines back then, the lead-up time was incredibly long. You had to have everything ready for the printer a month in advance or something. And so, stuff just, they'd get early stuff and they would print it, but sometimes it didn't come out that way. But they always had, or at least for a while anyway, they had a little 1-page non-glossy insert that they could clearly add really late in the process of the publishing. And they went to, or at least one of them went to Space World in Japan. And I remember that little 1-page insert had a picture of the controller, and my friends and I were just like, oh my God, what is that? How do you even use it? That's crazy. It blew our minds. So,
amazing.
My brother and I had one relatively early, but of course, as you all have been talking about going through the games chronologically, there was a pretty serious drought of good games in the first year. obviously Mario 64 was amazing. Pilot Wings was good, and there's a couple other really good ones like Wayne Gretzky and some of that stuff. But I do remember being very jealous of my friends that had a PlayStation because there were so many incredible games coming out on PlayStation, and I was like, this is not fair. Mario 64 is amazing, and I'm going to keep playing it, but the second game we got was Shadows of the Empire, which is not a great game. So,
Uh-oh.
yeah. So,
Counterpoint.
The perfect person.
the opening Hoth sequence was amazing. That was so much fun. That was a blast. And then you got to the first person shooter part, which was not as good. And also, it cost like $80 or something when we got it.
Really? Oh, yeah.
in
they were
1990s
expensive,
money.
yeah.
So,
Well,
yeah, it's been a big fixture for me. Like, I mean, I've played a lot of games, had a lot of, especially now as an adult, have had a lot of consoles. But it was a big fixture in those years as a teenager because, when GoldenEye came out, that blew the doors off everything. All the friends were at the house every day after school, death matching. Just
yeah.
a ton of multiplayer stuff that the other consoles just could not match. So we had a blast with it. Yeah,
That's amazing. Yeah, it's I'm glad to have Ryan. We've also kind of traced this with you, like talking about the drought on the N64, and it's cool to have you guys on who kind of can articulate it a little bit better because I feel like I was too young to. Just like, I could play 2 video games and it would be the greatest thing ever, But now, I don't know, I don't know if we feel like a drought just because the way we pace it out, but we have hit long, like, kind of stretches of like, not, I don't know, I guess we've enjoyed most of the games we've played recently, right? We've just had a lot of, like, weird middling games in there.
Yeah, there's been a couple we've maybe not enjoyed so much, but I think recently we've been playing some good games.
Yeah. But there's been a lot of like the weaker fighting games and things like that are like, not quite our speed, I guess.
I do know, I remember this pretty distinctly too, that one of the local mom and pop video stores, who the owners were kind of jerks. If you were 2 minutes late on the video return, you got blasted with fees and stuff. But they had, because they were not a big chain and there were not very many Nintendo 64 games, they imported games from Japan and they would cut the tabs off of the cartridge so it would fit in the cartridge slot. Because the hardware is identical, it's just these physical plastic tabs that would keep you from playing them. So they would cut them off with a Dremel or something, and so I remember renting a couple of really weird games that I couldn't figure out because there just wasn't anything else to rent in the first few months, really.
That's like a entrepreneurship there or something.
Yeah.
Really trying to serve something new to the market. But I mean, yeah, we're in a decent time right now in our timeline. We talked about it with you, Ryan. We're post GoldenEye, right? People are hyped up. We just came off of Extreme G as well, so that set the world on fire. Clearly,
we're in a big racing game era.
Yeah, basically every episode for like a couple back and going forward, there will be racing games involved. There's just a plethora of racing games.
I am interested to see the conversation when we eventually get to Wipeout 64, because I was a huge fan of Wipeout. I did like Extreme G a lot at the time, but Wipeout was just kind of on another level of coolness, for at least for myself and my friends.
Same. I love Wipeout, and I'm actually a big Wipeout 64 defender. I think it's a great version of the game, and it feels awesome with the analog stick. But it's not everyone's thing.
I agree, with the exception that the music's not quite the same.
That's fair.
You lose the CD audio, but it plays great.
Now this is a force to be reckoned with.
Let's zoom in to the time period with let's do our flashback segment. We'll talk about what was going on when our 2 games we're talking about today were released. which I don't think we've said, but we're talking about San Francisco Rush and Duke Nukem 64. We left the timeline October 28th, 1997, and we're moving up to November 7th. So, again, sorry, but then going 5 weeks strong, #1 song, Candle in the Wind. I don't know if you guys have anything to say about this, but that's just what this part of the show is now.
I know there was a lot of discussion about this on the last episode, and I have to say, it was a few years older than many of your guests, but I also don't really remember this that much, other than going, oh, that seems like a big deal. Anyway, I'm in high school, so whatever.
Okay, yeah. Most people were preoccupied. They wanted to get to whatever games they were playing, right? Right. I assume you. I feel like I might have asked you this at some point. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I think I was. I think I've been on another episode in the Princess Diana death era of the podcast.
Well, I just want to get all our guests on record, I think, and
yeah.
Look at
it's
all
Elton.
these.
It's Elton John, right? The song. Yeah, and it's like a newer version of a song he had written in like the 70s. Yeah, I mean,
like Marilyn Monroe song. He updated it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Elton John rules.
Yeah.
I don't really. This is not like a top song for me, but I don't know. Did I actually talk about Princess Di stuff on this before? I don't know if
That's
I have.
my goal is to make everyone question whether they have or not.
Yeah, because no, I also I was definitely of age, but I did not understand really the importance of royal figures. I still kind of don't.
That's fair.
To be honest. But I do remember this is where I kind of learned what paparazzi were.
Yeah.
Oh,
and that they were being blamed for her death because they were just swarming the car and stuff, and they were trying to get away from I remember the story being the driver was trying to get away from paparazzi, and that seemed terrifying to me, people chasing your car and taking your picture. And yeah, I think that was my big takeaway from the whole thing.
Yeah, I definitely at the time didn't register that, but I basically in the years to follow, that was always brought up as that was just kind of an example they'd always go to. We've been kind of in the same period for a while, a lot of the same top songs, and obviously Candle in the Wind. So I just as we enter the holidays, we're there's a lot of games coming out, so we're kind of in stasis a little bit. But so I was looking down the charts to see what's coming up. I want to get excited about a new song, that's not Diddy or whatever, So I saw that creeping up the charts, and hopefully it's a good sign. I think it's entered the top 10 is Tub Thumping by Chumbawamba. So I'm pretty hyped about that. Yeah. So I want to plant this as a storyline. We want to see if it'll go higher in the charts. Yeah.
Okay. I just want to throw this out there. If you do a Chumbawamba episode,
okay, yeah,
a full episode, they are one of the most fascinating bands of all time.
Oh, totally, yeah.
They're this English anarchist collective that was let's make a shitty radio song so we can get a ton of money and raise it for anarchist causes and stuff. And there is so much about that band, and people are way dismissive of them, but they're so interesting.
It's kind of a weird counterpoint to the narrative about the royal family, to have that blowing up at the same time. Well, maybe blowing up's a word in bad taste given the circumstances, but
if there's ever Chumbawamba 64.
That seems just because I think they rule too. I don't know all their albums and stuff like that. I've heard bits and pieces, but I love is it called Tub Thumping, the album, or is it just called
Tub Thumper?
Tub Thumper. I have listened to that many times and I love it. So I feel like we could pull out an episode on that because
that was a perennial visitor in the used CD bin because people bought it for the single and then went, "What the hell is the rest?"
What is the rest of this? Yeah.
Oh, what's the other single on there is pretty good too.
Amnesia.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty good. They actually
You've heard
the most interesting thing about Chumbawamba's like discography is they have an album that's a 2 CD set, and one CD is like them, it's like a live album, and the other CD is spoken word by Noam Chomsky.
Wow,
That rules.
That rocks.
Yeah.
I'm not a huge fan. I don't know everything, but I was going to bring up the album that's all like 300-year-old English rebel songs they recorded
Yeah,
a cappella, which is really incredible.
Wow,
So good.
see, bet people didn't expect to tune into the Duke Nukem episode to get the Chumbawamba praise, but
Duke's kind of an anarchist.
yeah,
In
of
his
a
own
type,
way.
for sure. Yeah. I Know What You Did Last Summer finishes its 3-week run at number 1 at the box office for the weekend, and then it's followed by Starship Troopers.
Young people from all over the globe are joining up to fight for the future.
I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part too.
Wow.
Yeah, just a lot of cool stuff in this.
Back-to-back bangers.
Yep.
And Ryan, I gotta ask you, do you know how the DVD menus are on either of these movies?
I have a copy of Starship Troopers,
Okay.
which I haven't actually watched on DVD. Actually, I Know What You Did Last Summer, which happens to be right next to me. It's a VHS. I don't actually have a DVD copy, sadly. But it will show up at a thrift store at some point, and I will buy it.
In video games, so I'm gonna list all the video games that I read that came out at this time period, and then, whatever excites you guys, we can talk about. So we had Shipwreckers, Riven, the sequel to Myst, Coldcept, The Curse of Monkey Island, Zork Grand Inquisitor, Crash Bandicoot 2 Cortex Strikes Back, Shock Troopers, and Colony Wars. I know some of those games. Any of those? McKenna, any of those?
I'm familiar with Crash Bandicoot.
We're familiar with the guy. We'll talk about him someday, yeah. I know, obviously, the Myst and Monkey Island, those pretty classic games. But
Shock Troopers is the Neo Geo game, right?
I don't know that one.
If it's the one I'm thinking of, that's a pretty solid action.
That is an awesome game. Yeah, both that and its sequel are really good.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is it. I really like the late 90s era because there's so many platforms out. You have Neo Geo and obviously PlayStation and 64, Saturn, whatever. But also this is an era of exclusive PC games.
Oh, yeah.
AAA PC exclusive, you want to buy a higher speed CD-ROM drive if you're going to play Riven on this thing. And now most big PC games are also console releases and stuff, but it is interesting thinking about Monkey Island and Riven and stuff as they were, giant box PC games at CompUSA at the time.
Even just looking at our games we're talking about today, we've got one that's an arcade game and one that was originally a PC game. So, and there's a lot to do with both of them, particularly Duke. There's a lot to say about getting them onto different platforms and stuff. Actually, why don't we switch over and talk about some games?
Rush!
San Francisco Rush is a port of the 1996 arcade racing game where you race through the hilly streets of San Francisco and its landmarks. There are 6 tracks that can be played in reverse or mirrored, full of shortcuts, secret stunt tracks, and hidden keys that unlock extra vehicles. 1 or 2 players can choose a single race, a circuit, or practice mode. If you press C up during the countdown of practice mode with 2 players, you'll start a 5-minute game of tag. You can adjust the fog and wind levels, as well as the difficulty and number of drone cars you race against. You'll also be able to choose between vehicles with different skill levels, from beginner cars which are slower and easier to keep on the tracks, to faster cars that are harder to control.
And the fog level...
It starts
at light. So, Jeremy, our guest of honor, our new guest, why don't you tell us first, what's your personal history with this game?
Yeah, so I don't remember exactly how we came on it. So my brother and I had a subscription to Nintendo Power, so we might have read about it in there in advance. And I'd seen it in the arcade. I think I'd played it maybe once in the arcade. And it's a great arcade game, one of the all-time great racers in the arcade. But we got a copy. I don't remember if it was a birthday or a Christmas or when, but we got it at some point. And honestly, the first time you're on the very first track and you get your first big error, like we both just were like, oh my God, this is the greatest game I've ever played. Because... like there's a history of racing games or driving games more generically, I guess, that involve like jumps and big air and stuff. But going into the 3D era, this was like a whole new thing, Yeah. Like, I don't even think the cars in the first Ridge Racer could leave the ground. Like a lot of the early 3D racing games, the cars were more or less stuck to the ground for technical limitations and whatnot. And so to have these just massive jumps... And then just sort of the kind of slightly silliness of the whole thing, we just had a blast with it. And as we started to figure out, like, oh, you can do, like, weird tricks. Like, you just sort of organically discovered that as we played it. Like, you can grab the e-brake and start sliding around and flip through the air and try to land the flips, We just had a ton of fun with this game. And then, of course, trying to find all the keys took a really long time because, we're sort of... At this point in time, you can get online and look up things like codes and secrets, and it's not too hard to get access to them, but it was still kind of not the easiest thing to find sometimes. So there was a lot of like, what the hell is that thing floating in the air? It looks like a key, and then we figure out, oh, there's a bunch of them. You can,
right.
You can collect them. What the hell? So yeah, it was a pretty big game in my household growing up because it's just I think still a really solid racing game. It has. I have a few nitpicks here and there, but in replaying it for this episode, I was having a blast, and some of the all the shortcuts that was kind of novel. That like it's not just a track; it's like sort of a whole world, and you can kind of cut through the backyards of things and stuff. Really was novel, at least for me anyway. And then also the music. The music was ridiculous, and we always got a lot of laughs out of that. To the point that now I unironically love listening to it, even though I would say it's objectively pretty bad.
Sure. You're like... we played a lot of racing games, as we mentioned, and I don't think we've played anything quite exactly like this. There's some games we can compare it to. So, and some of the things you pointed out, like the air time and just kind of the, like, more, like you have more of an ability to, like, goof around in the game a little bit more. And I think that kind of made it stand out. Ryan, how about you? What was your backstory with this game?
Yeah, so at this point in the N64 timeline, I was already a trader. I had already moved to PlayStation.
We've been tracking that, yeah.
After getting my N64 at launch, I was already down the PlayStation road, and the first game I bought for my PlayStation was Ridge Racer Revolution, which was actually like pretty new at that time, and so like that to me felt like the only racing game I needed on any platform, because I just would play it over and over again and just try to beat my time. So like I really was like out of racing games at this time outside of Ridge Racer. So I didn't actually come to this game until and the N64 port in particular, until like years later when I was able to just like, I think I first played it at the video game store I worked at in like 2001, and I played it and I was like, oh, this is like really fun, and like finding the secrets is interesting, and like you play it in like a different way, because like when you're looking for secrets and stuff, you're like not even trying to win races really, so it's more like exploratory, which is something when Beetle Adventure Racing comes along, that's like another similar vibe. So yeah, I got into it then, and I like 2001, like an N64 racing game, it was like $5, like maybe even less. So I mean, not like a new complete and box copy, but like a cartridge, which actually I think this game is still pretty affordable if you're just buying a cartridge. I don't think it's more than like $10 or $15.
I think my brother has the copy we had when I was a kid, so I actually bought one off eBay. It was like $12, I think.
Nice.
So very affordable. And
then I went back to it recently, and it's a fun pick up and play game, and it's like you were saying, there's a lot of maybe unintentional, maybe intentional hilarity, a mixture of both, because it's just like there's some pretty bonkers stuff in here that I'm sure we'll talk about.
Oh yeah. You McKenna, you have no history with this one at all, but
not really. We had just encountered it at the arcades, but that's been like within the past year or two.
Yeah, I think we played like the one in the Milwaukee area. We played. It had the Rock.
Yeah.
The Alcatraz version, which I think is that's like a hidden track in this you can get with a Game Shark. I don't know if it's the same.
Yes. So I'm pretty sure. So the Midway hardware in the arcade at the time had a hard drive, and I'm pretty sure Rush the Rock was just an upgrade where you bought the upgrade kit, and it would come with a new marquee you could put in with the name, and you would basically just get a new hard drive and a new thing to plug into the board, and it would, when you booted it up, it would have the new version. You can play it on the 64 version. You can do it with a Game Shark, but I think there's a code you can do too to get it. I did play it a few weeks ago, but I forget how I got to it because I don't have a Game Shark.
Okay. Yeah, I think we did that, and we also did, I think they have they have arcades out there for, is it 2049? It's like we've played that, but we haven't. It was cool to play this one because I don't think we'd ever experienced it. But what'd you think about it?
There.
Yeah, the airtime part was super fun. We said San Francisco, and I was like, oh, so we're gonna be driving on some hills.
They really take advantage.
Really
of
delivers
it,
on the airtime there, and with like the exploratory stuff, it really I remember a lot of us playing Mario Kart would try to drive off the tracks to get to certain areas like Peach's Castle, and this game is just, it wants you to do that. It wants you to explore around the tracks, find secrets.
I thought at one point I had done something wrong because I was like I didn't realize till later because I blew up like right away, but I was like in that orange like half pipe or like full pipe, I guess it is. Like I found my way up there on accident, and I was like freaking out. I was like, did I break the game? Did I do something cool? And it's like, I don't know. I mean, it was a cool feeling that they gave to me. Yeah. So you were, we had fun. I think like more with, like we were saying, like kind of the goof. I think the most fun we probably had together was doing like the tag mode that it has in the practice menu, which is a weird addition, but
yeah, it's fun. It's fun to just drive around in whatever direction try and find hiding places.
We didn't find a lot of I saw a lot of the keys, but we never like we didn't get to like unlocking anything. But I could see that's like, especially if that's like I mean, we've gone through a lot of racing games, but I think it's more reasonable that you probably would have only had one or two at the time, and so I could see that adding a lot to the game of like spending more time like going deeper into it, trying to like find, search every nook and cranny for these little Easter eggs or unlockables or whatever. So the keys and the airtime and like the exploring the worlds, like of all the racing games we've played, like none have had that exact same feeling. So that was pretty cool to this one to like stand out. It's very unique. How about just in general, like the racing element of it, like doing a race? Like how did that go for you?
It took a second to like figure it out. I think once you told me like don't necessarily try and stay on the tracks at all times. That's when I like got into it more.
Yeah, it was because I kept like just blowing up, and it was all I'm like, am I just like really bad at the game? And then I posted about it in our racing game expert Andrew was like, no, that's how you're supposed to play it. So I sort of embraced it after that. I was like, well, I don't mind if I run, head first into this building. It's fine. Jeremy, for you, like, just as a racing game, do you like, are you super into it? You were talking about like learning the different maneuvers and stuff. Does that help you? Like, do you feel like you ever got good at this game? I feel like it's difficult,
I think it is pretty difficult, especially in the one player. Like, I did play through a full circuit, and I did get first, but I had to restart the console a few times before I finished some of those races to make sure I finished in first, because it does a little bit of the rubber banding thing where it's like, I just had a perfect lap and this guy is on my ass. I do not understand what the hell, but I think it was more technical than I remembered it, to be honest. Like, maintaining speed through turns was pretty important in a way that like is true for real racing and real racing games, because it is kind of cartoony and it is a little silly, but I think the fundamentals of the physics of it are pretty solid. Some of the racing games you've talked about already, I think they're not all bad, but some of them are pretty clunky, especially by today's standards. And I think Rush still works pretty well, even though the physics are a little bit wild, but once you kind of get, wrap your head around that, it's like, oh, I can take advantage of some of this stuff a little bit. So yeah, I think it holds up pretty well as a racing game, just as a straight racing game. But obviously the more fun is like, I'm going to try for this shortcut at full speed, and I'm probably going to fail spectacularly. But there are a few places, a few of the tracks, and I don't want to jump too far ahead, but there are a few of the tracks where it's like, you probably should drive the wrong way down this track, because when you crash, it's going to put you so far ahead of the other racers. So there's some stuff like that you can kind of take advantage of that probably was not intentional, but it definitely made some of the races easier.
Yeah, I definitely felt like if I blew up, it would usually put me in a pretty decent spot. It would, but it often, like sometimes I felt like I had that sort of feeling where I was like, oh, I feel like I somehow got into first, like by no virtue of my own, So
yeah, it's not too punishing to blow up usually, but occasionally, when you first restart, your car's flashing and you have no hit detection for a second or two. And occasionally, right as your car's hit detection comes back online, another car will be inside of you, and then some pretty wacky stuff can happen.
Whoa. I can't imagine.
You can get a speed bump, like boosted forward super fast. If they're in front of you, you might just get blasted off the track again. There's some kind of weird things that happen occasionally there.
Wow. Okay. That I would love to see that happen. Ryan, how about you? As like a racer, are you into it on that sort of level?
Yeah, I think like I still think the game is fun. Like, it's overall fun. I found when revisiting it now that I initially was trying to play it like a racing game, and I found it like incredibly frustrating to just like to try to stay on the track, to try to like, have like, a good racing line on the track. Yeah. Like, especially I feel like turning is the game feels good on the N64 control stick, but I feel like turning is just like really weird in the game, and it's best just to like go wild on it.
Yeah.
And just like go off the track rather than trying to like do like a really nice like Gran Turismo type turn.
Totally.
And so getting used to that was that's an adjustment, but also like the game is pretty reliant on you using like secrets and shortcuts. So you kind of have to learn those. I don't know, maybe at least in single player, it felt like, again, like you were saying, Jeremy, like you can race a perfect lap and then still like be fourth place. Yeah. And like, what the hell am I doing wrong here? So like, but then if you start going into those shortcuts, then like you can easily like jump up the rankings. And I think that's something when I was like younger and had more free time is like really appealing to me. But like now it's like I cannot learn these. Like I am not in a position to learn these. It's like there was a time where I really loved the Forza Horizon games, and there was just like a million things to do in those games, and it was like, this is so cool, I love this so much. And then by the time we got to like the fourth one, I was like, I just want to like drive around a track. Like I can't do 100 hours of like finding all this stuff in a racing game. And so like I actually like clicked more with like the more recent Forza Motorsport, and like that game and Gran Turismo 7 are like the only racing games I play now, really. And that's just because I can like boot it up, play 2 races, and be like, cool. Like I don't have to really, I mean, like obviously if I was playing like online and competitively, like there's a lot to learn in those games, but you can still have like I did a race and I placed second, and that's what it is. Like there's no secrets in those tracks or anything, I guess. So like it kind of stresses me out now. It also reminds me of when my friends and I were playing Mario Kart Double Dash like religiously. It was like the number one game we were playing, like couch multiplayer, and it got to the point where everyone had learned what all the secrets were. So everyone was just going the exact same ways on every track, and it was just like about who could like push their way into like a secret passage first, kind of thing. And it like just it got like kind of less fun after that.
Sounds stressful. Yeah.
Yeah. So
too competitive.
I don't know. So I have like a weird relationship with racing games that are like super reliant on like secrets and shortcuts.
I think you're totally right on the time investment thing too, because some of the shortcuts are like way more bang for your buck than others. Some of them are incredibly difficult to drive through without crashing, and so it's like, don't even bother to try this unless you're just goofing around. And I knew that because I played this a lot when I was a teenager and I had a ton of time on my hands. But yeah, if I picked it up today with no knowledge, you're absolutely right. I would just go, this is cool, but I don't have time for this.
I think that's what it came down to for me too. But it's funny because I feel like there's worse racing games we've covered that I've spent more time on. And I think it's specifically because I think this game, it works better to me as an arcade game. As like you pick it up and you do a race, or like we race each other, or we do the tag mode and we goof around for a little bit. And it wasn't as strong for me. Like, one, I wasn't going to do the secrets. I'm in the same boat as you guys, but also I wasn't really that drawn in. I thought it was cool, but I wasn't really that drawn in by the circuit mode, because it just was like there, compared to like Top Gear Rally is another game we've talked about, and it had like it would do the same thing where it kind of like, okay, now you're doing this track but mirrored and it's snowing or it's whatever, and they would just reuse the tracks, which was fine, but they would kind of pre-package them as their own little like mini circuits, like of 3 or 4 races, and you'd beat it and they go, okay, you beat that season or whatever, on to the next one. And those were like they kind of had a difficulty curve to them, and they were like kind of like this nice bite size thing, whereas the circuit mode in this was just kind of like, we're gonna throw all of them at you. It's kind of random. Some of them are gonna be really easy, some are gonna be really hard, and it just didn't quite, I just wasn't really up for that. I've been into that sort of thing with some of like the sports games we've covered, but like with this I was like not down to just do really bad then do okay. Like I almost want to like feel myself kind of getting better at the racing, and specifically the racing. I don't want to, like, similar to you, Ryan, I don't want to learn all the shortcuts or anything. Though I did like learning, like, okay, here I can cut off the course a little bit, but I need to go at like this speed and this angle, or I'm going to fly completely away and it's going to be horrible. Some of that was fun, but yeah, just the circuit mode itself didn't quite work for me. But what was fun was I started going like, okay, and this is what I do with arcade racers at the arcade, is like, okay, what are the easy courses? And I kind of play them until I like can kind of get decent at them, and then I move on to like medium or whatever. And I usually fall off at medium because it's too hard, but it's that sort of thing where I like create my own sort of difficulty progression, through the game. But the circuit mode, it didn't really, and McKenna, you didn't really do. No, you didn't really do circuit. We raced each other mostly.
Like a lot of
which was fun.
Single races. Yeah, it was fun.
My replay of the circuit. Well, first of all, if you get first to the circuit, you get the F1 car, which is significantly better than any of the other cars and makes getting the keys and stuff a lot easier. But
I do like that. That's cool.
I have to agree, it's a bit of a slog, because a lot of the tracks in the game are, I think they're pretty well designed for the most part, but some of them, when you go in reverse, are painful. They are punishing. They were not designed to be raced in that direction. So there's a few where it's like, oh my God, I'm doing like track 4 or 5 in reverse, and now it's mirrored, and I got to do it again. Like it was a bit much.
Even just some of the city tracks, like McKenna, you kind of had this issue sometimes. It was cool. Like we haven't had a game quite like this where you're racing around like through a city or anything, but you found, right, that like a lot of the turns, like, and trying to figure out where to go sometimes.
Oh yeah, I'd be driving, and I knew there'd be a turn coming up maybe somewhere, but I'd be like, I don't know which way it wants me to go. And I just turn and be like, oh, I'm going the wrong way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like maybe it was a little inconsistent with, like, sometimes it would have an arrow telling you that it was time to turn, but other times it wouldn't.
Yeah, it was a little tricky.
Yeah, this is a game that the N64's limited draw distance does not do any favors. I was feeling the same thing, where it was like all of a sudden, and then, like I said before, it's like, it's kind of hard to turn on a dime in this game. Like you're probably going to run into a wall if you don't have the track memorized, which I think you know, again, that's a thing with, you know, any racing game. Like, the more you memorize the tracks, the better you're going to do. But in this game, I feel like it's really reliant on you memorizing things, because turns come up really fast, and also you need to kind of know which shortcuts to take and which ones not to take.
They also come up like while you're in the air sometime. I
very
noticed, and I'm like, I can't turn while I'm in the air. And I just be in the air, and I'm like, I guess I'm running into this wall now.
There's like a super memorable one with like you go up and then there's like a bunch of trees when you're landing, and it's like it's such a pain in the ass. Yeah.
And the brakes seem to go from nothing to locked up instantly if you use the brakes, and so that you think, oh no, I got to turn, I got to slow down, but you lock up the brakes and then you just slide into the wall. So,
Yep.
my favorite strategy, honestly, is to come into a turn hot and bounce off the inside of a car in front of me because they slowed down, and that works more often than you'd think.
At least that, I feel like it does give the game a cool vibe. Like it is very fun, and like the exploding is very funny. Like we laughed a lot when we were playing this game, for sure.
There's a lot of car flipping,
like insane car flipping.
Yeah.
Again, Top Gear was the only other one with like totally insane. But that one, like, it felt kind of bad when you would do that. Like, it would ruin the whole race. This one, it does a better job of like keeping you in general too. It's like, of a lot of the games we covered, one of the best of like actually making you feel like you're in a race, like racing a bunch of cars, as opposed to like some of them where it's like you're just trying to like gain, you know, you start in last and you're trying to like, you know, work your way up, or, you know, something like that. This game does a good job of like simulating like a race with other cars, so I'll give it props for that. A lot of vibes points, I think. It's got like silly. You mentioned the silly music, Jeremy. Like, I feel like that's a.
Yeah, we gotta talk about the music more.
Is it cooler? We didn't even listen. Is it cooler like in the arcade? It reminded me a little bit of Cruisin' USA, where like the N64 music for that's kind of cheesy, but you listen to the arcade versions and they're kind of banging.
The arcade version. So I have the Midway Arcade Treasures 3 collection that has all racing games on GameCube, and I kind of ruined the 64 version for myself. Nice.
Bam.
Because the version on GameCube, and presumably the PS2 version, runs at 60 frames a second at high resolution. So it was kind of like, oh no, I have to go back to this much lower frame rate. But the arcade music is, I think, the same arrangements, but it's different, like a different sound font for the N64. And so some of them come off as a little bit cooler, and some of them I think are better on the 64, actually. But they're all a little bit cheesy.
Yeah, it's not memorable. And again, like, I was, you know, born and raised Ridge Racer, which is like the best video game music ever. Maybe, so like,
maybe it's unfair.
Nothing ever competes, but I do appreciate this. Like, it gives, you know, the game a time and feel, I think, to have a soundtrack like this, which is, I would say, like a cross between like Cruisin' USA and Excite Truck. And I think that's like
the back of the box.
Pretty, even though Excite Truck won't be released for 10 years. So like, I don't know, I can always like appreciate some like chunky butt rock like in the N64 sound font, which I think like every N64 game sounds cool and interesting to me because of like the, you know, just the sound hardware in it. So yeah, I would say I'm a fan of it. It's not something I'm a fan of it in the context of the game. I would not, you know, import a $57 CD soundtrack from Japan if such a if such a thing existed.
I want that on wax.
Like
that
I did with mini Ridge Racer soundtracks.
Oh yeah,
Ridge Racer is fantastic. Yeah.
Just vibes in general. McKenna, what do you?
In general, so I was looking at the manual today, and I saw it has a map of all the courses that they have in their version of San Francisco, and it has all the landmarks labeled on the map, and then
that is cool.
Then it shows the individual tracks and where they are on those tracks, which got me excited. I can't say I noticed any other than like the Golden Gate Bridge while I was playing, but it made me want to go back and like we're gonna have like
do some tourism.
We're gonna do some sightseeing. Yeah, McKenna's sightseeing of San Francisco Rush.
That's a good idea. Yeah,
I'll have to take some pictures, but
it was cool. Like to take the one place as a setting is pretty cool. I think.
Yeah, and if you know San Francisco a little bit, I've only been there a couple of times, but they have landmarks in every track all throughout. Like, it's actually really well handled, in my opinion. The stuff they throw in, like, no, it's not perfectly accurate distances apart or whatever, but like, you know, they cartoon it up in a way that I think works really well. And I also was thinking about how it's a really interesting sort of time capsule, because if you're down on the Embarcadero, like, that 3-story highway was damaged in an earthquake, and it's been torn down. So when you go off of that broken highway, that existed at that time, but then they tore that down. I don't remember exactly when, but a couple years later, because it was falling apart and from the earthquake. And so it's kind of a weird, like, if they were a couple years in either direction, that track would have been radically different.
Whoa, that's so cool. Yeah, I think it did a better job of conveying San Francisco than a lot of like Cruisin' USA does the USA at times.
Yeah.
But that but I kept thinking it plays better generally. It's just like a better game, I think, all around. But I will say, like, there is something fun where just from our multiplayer perspective, like, we cruise the USA together. And, you know, they've got all the tracks, but I think there could have been some kind of, other than the circuit, like some type of San Francisco tour or something we could have gone on, you know? We never quite...
That'd be cool.
But I feel like we got to embrace the exploration route and just go all in on that, so...
Well, of course, there are 2 sequels to this on the 64. There's Rush 2, which only came out on the Nintendo 64, and had a much bigger emphasis on the tricks, and like had beefed that up so it was more formal. And then there's Rush 2049, which is basically the same city but future version, which I think we might be closer to 49 now than we are in 1997. I'd have to do the math on that, but I don't think San Francisco is going to look like that game in 2049.
We've got a little bit of time.
Yeah,
let's get to work.
We got time.
Okay. We gotta get to Duke Nukem. Anybody have any final words on anything else you want to say on San Francisco Rush? I think we gave it its due.
Really quickly, give a shout out to the music when you finish your game and you're putting your name in the high score.
That's in my notes.
What the hell was that?
Yeah,
and that's in the arcade also.
What's your name?
And then nothing
weird.
nasty now.
Yeah, nothing nasty now.
That has been cracking me up for a couple of decades now.
So good.
Sorry. Go ahead, Ryan.
Okay. Just while we're on the subject of like game over in putting in your initials, like this is like I had always kind of associated that with like Sega racing games because like Daytona has like a really cool initials thing, and like Sega Rally does. That's like pretty memorable. So it's really interesting to see this. I had kind of forgotten or whatever about this, so it kind of caught me by surprise, and it was cool to see it in like a Western racing game. And I think this game does have a lot of like Sega influence in it, like through a very Western lens.
Yeah.
But the best example of it that I can think of is the game over in the initials putting in part.
Start with a C. Start with a D.
You know, when it's not Sega, but when I was looking at the footage of the PlayStation port, where it's like a little bit more,
Well,
not a good game.
not good, no. But like just in terms of like when I was looking at just some of the like the car, like it's like sharper looking cars and everything. It looked kind of cooler, to be honest, and the menus look pretty cooler. It did give it more of a like a sleek vibe, less Cruisin' USA and more, I don't know, I guess more Ridge Racer or something, that type of vibe. But that's me speaking as sort of a lay person when it comes to those type of racing games. But it looked cool, but apparently it's not good. Okay.
Apparently it's like unplayable. I haven't actually played the PlayStation version, but I was looking at reviews for this episode, and I kind of remember it at the time. But like the PlayStation version, if you hop over to game rankings as we do in 2024, it has a 39%.
Ooh, well, we might have to try that out someday.
Yeah, I do remember the 64 version getting like 8 out of 10 or 7.5 out of 10, and then the PS1 got like a 3.
Okay, that makes sense.
Said straight up, it's don't buy it.
Yeah.
Okay, because everyone I saw talking about this game talked about it like it was an N64 game. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure it was an arcade game and it was on PlayStation, but people fondly, it's probably because of like the experiences like you mentioned, Jeremy, like that was probably where most people found the most love for the game, you know?
And real quickly, I will also say that that you guys can see this on my video as someone with some arcade games in my house. Sit-down racing games are generally much cheaper than you think they are if you're interested in picking one up for your house, because they are enormous and they weigh a lot and no one wants to have to move them.
Well, McKenna.
So you can get something like a San Francisco Rush in decent-ish condition for, well, I don't know, prices have been going up since COVID, but you could get one for $500 or $600, which I think is much cheaper than most people would guess.
We're going to ask for that for a housewarming gift when we get a house.
They do take up a huge amount of floor space.
And maintenance there are many things that can go wrong.
Oh, sure.
With those.
They're not too bad, but you do need to have a friend that knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
This is the one note that I made for this, and this is more about racing games in general, but so something to think about as we play more racing games is that I don't believe in breaking in racing games.
That's right on.
So
you don't want to,
that statement will be directly correlated with my enjoyment of the racing games that we play. If I have to break, my feelings about the game will diminish. This one, I didn't feel like I had to break too much, so...
You get rewarded with, like, a cool explosion.
Yeah, I just get to explode and, like, jump ahead, so...
One thing I want to note in this game, because it's important to the lore of this podcast, is that there is so much Mace the Dark Age advertising
Oh my god!
in this game.
I forgot to bring that up, you're right.
I was going to bring that up too. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
As the number one Mace the Dark Age podcast on the internet, which I think you established for yourselves. I thought that was important to note.
I feel like this is sort of the Mace the Dark Age of racing games. It's not... No, I don't think anyone considers it the best, but once you play it, and it's actually like... pretty. Well, I guess most people think this one's really good. People don't really have assumptions about Mace, but... I guess it's better. It's better than a lot of people think it is, you know? Like, I don't know.
Maybe Mace the Dark Age is the San Francisco Rush of fighting games.
That might be, yeah. like don't play Mace like it's Mortal Kombat or something. Play it like it's Mace.
It's not Virtual Fighter.
Oh no, it's not.
Yeah.
Introducing San Francisco Rush Extreme Racing. The only rules you need to follow are the ones in your head. San Francisco Rush for Nintendo 64 and PlayStation consoles from Midway.
So from Extreme Racing, let's go over to another extreme figure. McKenna. Duke Nukem 64.
Okay. Duke Nukem 64 is a modified and expanded port of first-person shooter Duke Nukem 3D and sequel to Duke Nukem and Duke Nukem 2. Beginning in Los Angeles, Duke will fight off an alien invasion using weapons like a pistol, shotgun, pipe bombs, and the Shrinker Expander, all while making crude jokes and referencing action films. Jetpacks, night vision goggles, and scuba gear will help Duke navigate levels, while water fountains and broken fire hydrants will keep him healthy. He'll also be able to save some babes that have been captured by the aliens. The campaign can be played in single player or co-op, and there's also a Duke match mode, in which players can duke it out against each other or AI opponents.
So, I feel like there's just a lot to talk about this game.
A lot to unpack here.
On so many
much
different
Duke.
levels.
Critical discourse.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess just for starters, Ryan, why don't you go first this time? What's your personal history with Duke Nukem /64
Oh my
/ whatever?
goodness. Okay. So I actually started with Duke with the shareware of the original Duke Nukem and Duke Nukem 2, the 2D action shooter games. They were like, I was I had consoles when I was a kid, but really I played the most games on PC just because of shareware. And you could get a disc from someone at school with 30 games on it, or you could, for like $5 at Walmart, get a disc with 100 games on it, and you just could play so much. And I think Duke Nukem, and especially Duke Nukem 3D, were a huge part of like the mainstream shareware scene. So that was my exposure. So I already knew who Duke Nukem was, and I knew the series before 3D hit, which 3D was like the big game that for the character and for the company and everything. And yeah, so I was like anticipating Duke Nukem 3D. Like, I was a huge Doom guy when I was younger, still am. So yeah, I was so stoked to play Duke Nukem 3D when it came out. Like Doom, I only played the shareware for like a decade, and then finally got a chance to, finally got like a CD-ROM copy and like, whenever, and played through like the rest of the game. And then Duke Nukem 64, I did not play until roughly 10 years ago. 10 years ago, as of July 10th. And the reason I know this is because I was married. I got married on July 11th, and my bachelor party involved a Nintendo 64 in a hotel room with a bunch of friends, and
Duke match?
My friend brought the N64 and the game. He brought a few games. He obviously brought GoldenEye because that's what we were like planning on playing. But he's like, actually, we're gonna play Duke Nukem 64, and
Wow.
so we Duke matched for my bachelor party,
That
and that
rocks.
was the first time I'd played this version.
I love a lot about this one. That is a great memory, I think, and it's good to tie this part of your life to Duke Nukem, I think.
Yeah, the last time I was single was all about Duke Nukem.
The cherished
Yeah.
memories.
Yeah,
That's the ultimate single guy game for sure.
it is. And divorced guy game. But, yes.
But I also love, I have to admit, I didn't even know about Duke Nukem 1 and 2 until, like, I think probably around the time, like, Forever actually came out, like, in,
Oh, God.
like, the lore, there was, like, a lot of lore around that game, and, like, when I was young, I just knew Duke Nukem 3D, and I didn't know it was a series, so, I think the first time I ever really saw it was, Ryan, when you posted screenshots, like when I actually saw like what it looked like. You shared screenshots on Blue Sky, and I was like, this looks so cool. So I want to go back and play those. It looked like a lot of fun. But Jeremy, how about you? What's your backstory?
So not unlike Ryan, I mean, if your family had a PC or a Mac for that matter in the early to mid 90s, shareware was where it was at, because you could just play anything and everything, because that was the model. You would release like the first 10 levels shareware, get people hooked, and then you would physically mail a check to somewhere in California for the equivalent of today's like $300 with inflation, and they would mail you the box with the discs or the CDs in it, And so, yeah, played a lot of Doom shareware, played a ton of Duke 3D shareware. I did play Duke 3D first, but then I played Duke 1 and 2 later, coming back to them. And they are a lot of fun. They're really good platform action shooters. But given that I would have been around 15 or so when Duke 3D released, somewhere in that ballpark, it was a pretty big hit for me and my friends at that age. This guy that's, blowing up aliens and doing movie quips, and then there's women in bikinis, and we were like, this is the coolest game ever. And it was good that it actually plays really well. It's actually a very well-made game. Probably the high point of the series, given what came later with Duke Nukem Forever. But, yeah. But I think I'm almost positive we rented it once or twice on the Nintendo 64. But I remember at the time being kind of disappointed with it, and I think it's because you went from the really crisp PC 60 frames a second, pixels you can see, the details really good, to the Nintendo 64 blurry vision, where they crank the anti-aliasing up so high on every game that I always felt like that was, I know they pushed that a lot at first, like, look how smooth the graphics are. And I was like, yes, everything looks like a blob now. But I remember being a little disappointed with the graphics being a little bit blurry, and then also being like, I can't believe they censored it. But now, as an adult, going back and playing it recently, I am kind of shocked at how much they kept in, to be honest.
Right, yeah.
I was like, wow, this is a Nintendo game, and yes, they did cut a little bit out here and there, but like there's still quite a bit of the risque stuff that I did not remember. Not that I've become a prude in my old age, but I was like, whoa, because we're still coming out of the era where Nintendo is like, we don't want blood in Mortal Kombat, just like a couple years before.
Right.
So a big shift, has happened there, but they're still not willing to go all the way.
No.
But yeah, I do remember having fun with it in the rentals on 64, even though at the time I wasn't like as excited about it as I was the PC version.
Okay.
Now going back, I think it's fantastic. I think it holds up really well. I was genuinely surprised at how well it played, and any controls on a game you haven't played a while, it's going to take you a minute to get back in the swing of it. But I picked it up pretty quick, and I had a blast. So,
yeah, for sure. I did play it like when I was younger. I had a friend. I think I've mentioned I had a friend who's old, who had a like much older brother. Well, not much older, but when you're young, like anyone who can like drive a car seems like an adult to you. And I think I mentioned I would play. He would help me in Mario Kart. He was a nice guy. Same guy who also showed me GTA for the first time. So that was kind of the benefit of knowing you either had friends whose like parents didn't care, or you had friends like this who had an older brother who just had all that stuff. So I remember like I have very specific. I was telling you, McKenna, when I was playing it, like I very specifically remembered like these really specific like raunchy moments in the game or whatever like were forever like burnt into my brain because some 16-year-old kid was showing an 8-year-old me like, oh look, you can throw go up to the stripper and like tip them or whatever. Yeah. That type of stuff. But yeah, that was that game for me. And so like even just some of the early like sections and levels I remembered, but I had never played it on 64. So it was cool to go and experience that. But it was also just for me, I went and I got the like modern release of it and played through it that way. And it was just kind of fun to go down that memory lane and then some, and kind of like play through like parts of the game I probably never saw as a kid. So it was fun to experience it both ways. But McKenna, you I don't think you were aware of Duke Nukem at all.
No.
Not
not until more recently.
Yeah, as we were like coming up to it, I think we would.
Yeah, I think when we were gearing up to play Doom 64 and kind of looking at
the other
first-person shooters that came up.
Yeah, and we've done that, and we've done Hexen on the show, so you're kind of familiar with similar types of. I mean, we're talking about first-person shooters, I guess, but of that era, we've been kind of a little bit more immersed in. I guess it's not really your genre, but just in general, maybe not even. What did you think of Duke Nukem?
It's a lot. I like how much there is to interact with.
Yeah.
In the world, and how much he responds to everything. I think maybe, I don't know if it was first or second level, but we came across a pool table where you can interact with it, and I just sunk all of the balls, and I was like, all right, I just played pool. I just played a whole game of pool.
Yeah, it's so fascinating because like a lot of the things you can do in the game are stuff that's like, you're like, oh, come on. But like the fact that someone at that time, especially at that time, with like probably how difficult it was, like spent the time to put these things in there. It's like, it's a weird feeling when you're playing it because it's both the stuff that's like, this feels like maybe outdated or something, but also like just weird, like the time and effort that went into it. It's like a weird back and forth feeling I have while playing it. But yeah, we've been in this era of like the 90s stuff of everything's like in your face, play it loud, that type of stuff.
It's
like
got that sense of humor.
Yeah,
what
do you make of that era of like Duke Nukem's sense of humor and that sort of thing?
There's some of it that's like, okay, that this is of its time, but it's
almost like so stupid
like,
that it's funny.
Yeah. But then he says other stuff like I'm gonna rip off your head and take a shit down your throat, which he means literally.
Yeah.
I was like, oh no. Don't do that.
It's a fine line to walk because it's hard to like, I don't know, on paper what's actually gonna be funny and what's gonna be like weird is interesting. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what to make of, because I feel like all the stuff, especially like all the like the stuff that would be considered more offensive or whatever, but just like generally the the like quips and like references and stuff like that. Like I don't know. Maybe it's like maybe I have some like partial nostalgia for the game or something, but like a lot of it I was mostly charmed by. But I feel like if I played a game now and it was just like constantly quipping and referencing stuff like this, I would be like, please shut up, you know. I don't know. Jeremy, what do you make of this? What do you make of the vibe of Duke Nukem?
The Joss Whedon of games, quipping constantly.
Yeah, or you know, I watched like the trailer for him in like a Bullet Storm or whatever. I didn't know this was a thing until I was just like, look, like what has Duke Nukem been up to? And like I was watching it, and it had like sort of like Borderlands sort of annoying vibe, and I was like, man, this sucks. But is this really different than Duke Nukem 64 3D? It's not really. It's just evolved, right? Am I wrong? I don't know.
I think at the time I had not seen the movies that the quips were coming from.
Okay.
And so it was like, kick ass and chew bubblegum and I'm all out of gum. That is the funniest thing I've ever heard. And now I'm like, oh, they just lifted that from a movie. But
when I was a kid, I thought that was his thing. Yeah. I thought that was a Duke Nukem thing until I was like a teenager, I think.
No, I think it works. I think it mostly works in this context because it is a little bit clunky and it is sort of like in the context of the time, it's kind of charming. But yeah, if you tried to do the same thing now, I think it would just be really grating, like almost immediately. And I think the fact that, you know, on some level there was enough technical limitation that Duke couldn't just be talking the whole time, that probably worked to their advantage. They're like, we don't have the memory to have like 3 hours of dialogue recorded. We're just going to have a handful of little clips here and there that, you know, it was a little bit of a spice to the flavor as opposed to like the dominant feature of the experience.
Yeah, like a lot of the other comparable games we've played don't really have anything sort of like it. So when he is reacting to things in the environment, it's like, whoa, that's cool. You know, like even if it's like some dumb quip or something offensive, maybe it's like, wow, like I'm impressed in a weird way.
McKenna, you mentioned the interactivity. I think that was the other thing that really made this one stand out, both on PC and 64, because like Doom is an incredible game. It is still very playable. It is still a blast to play, but you don't really interact with anything other than shooting stuff. And Duke Nukem, you can walk up to the Duke Nukem arcade game and he says, "I don't have time to play with myself," you know, and it's just like, whoa, you know, no other game in a sort of a pseudo 3D environment like this had that level of interactivity that I had seen at the time. And so it really endears itself to you because of that, I think.
Yeah. It's still, like I said, still impressed me all these years later playing it. Ryan, what do you think? What do you think about Duke Nukem?
As a person?
Yeah, the guy. We need to figure out what's his deal. Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like the Duke Nukem like arc of relevance has been fascinating because I, again, like Jeremy, I was a teenage boy when this came out, and so like everything hit, like everything was like, you know, and at the time I really associate this with a friend of mine also named Ryan at that time, and the things we were into were PC games and movies. And so like we'd sleep over at each other's houses and we'd play shareware stuff on the computer and we would watch movies. And the number one movie we would watch every time we had a sleepover was Clerks, which is non-stop vulgar, like just
McKenna just saw that for the first time.
Oh my god. Mm-hmm. I love it. I don't know how it aged. I don't know how any person watching it now for the first time. But it's like I knew every line from like every quip from that movie. I knew every quip from Duke Nukem. I also was like discovering the movies that, you know, he's quoting at that time. So like I was like I had played Duke Nukem 3D, and then shortly after I saw like Evil Dead 2 for the first time. And, you know, I was like discovering all this stuff at once, and I was like, oh, this is like so cool. And again, it's a really good game. Like, it's a really good shooter from this era. And the level design is phenomenal. I know, Goo, you mentioned the in the new version, the developer's commentary that's in it.
Yeah, that was very cool.
Yeah, and like playing that version and like learning about how they constructed this stuff, and they were doing like so much wild stuff tech-wise, plus like so much personality. Whether or not it's a good personality, I think is debatable, but it is, you know, it is like, this is a game with like a character, which you don't really get in Doom or Hexen or, you know, Rise of the Triad, like whatever games from this era. But I think Duke Nukem, and Jeremy, you kind of mentioned this, is like in both the character and the series is the big jock who peaked in high school. And
yeah,
like that's and like I feel like this is Duke Nukem 3D is Duke Nukem's high school, and then it was like kind of diminishing returns from there, and then like his big comeback being Duke Nukem Forever, which is not an irredeemable game. I think there's some stuff that's okay about it, but by this point, like, I never wanted to hear Duke Nukem talk again. Like,
yeah.
It's like he's so embarrassing as like a human by the time you get to Duke Nukem Forever. So yeah.
Duke Nukem 3D is Duke's senior year high school quarterback.
Yeah.
Duke Nukem Forever is the 10-year reunion where everyone's like, oh my god, he's exactly the same.
You're still this guy. Wow.
Oh, hey. Okay. Oh, boy.
Yeah.
That's a good, yeah.
I will say, all that said, I think you know, and I only have passing familiarity with like some of the other Duke games, like Time to Kill and whatever that came after, which I think are like fine for the most part, but I will say the new episode that they made for the anniversary edition of the game that had the original designers making a new episode in approximation of the build engine is like pretty awesome. Like
it was sweet.
It feels right. Yeah.
I have not played that. I'm gonna have to.
He's doing his quips, you know, and you're going around the world and they're horrible. You know, like you're in France and he's like, someone cut the fromage. But it's like, I don't know what it is. Is it just that it's like, and this might be just unfair, but it's like, I think maybe it is because it's like this old style of game. There's something quaint about it. And there's something about him saying these things in this like game where the music's like, bow, 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 bow. They like, it's like charming in a weird way. I don't know. Do you get that, McKenna?
Yeah.
He's like charmingly going like, hey, baby.
Yeah, it's kind of like you roll your eyes and laugh, but it's not like, you know, annoying yet.
But I'm like, if it was the same game, but it like modern graphics and everything, would it be like, would I have that? I don't know. It's like maybe that you can't actually.
That's tough because you know, it does sort of feel like Duke's in on the joke a little bit, which kind of lets some of the more slightly more inappropriate stuff hit a little softer, you know. But yeah, if you take it out of the context of like, this is a brightly colored, you know, like cartoony shooter, even though it's like sort of realistic for the time, it's still very much like a, you know, primary colored key cards you're finding and stuff like that. It's still
Yeah,
kind of silly.
You're basically playing Doom still.
Yeah,
You know?
if you give it the Call of Duty 2024 experience with 200 gigs of textures that you have to download, it's probably going to come off a little bit weird.
Yeah.
I think the closest approximation, which has been referenced like multiple times here, is like Borderlands in the modern times, and that game for me, I think, proves kind of what I was saying earlier. Like like Duke 3D hit at the right time, and I bet like Borderlands hit at the right time for like kids who were like 15 when the game came out. But for me, like on paper, Borderlands is like the perfect video game because it's like probably like my two favorite genres are like boomer shooters and loot games. Like I love Doom and I love Diablo and Phantasy Star Online. Like that's my jam, and that's like what Borderlands is. But I tried playing it, and it is just the characters just talk the whole time, and the humor is like, I think it's like good for that kind of humor, and it like works, but like it's exhausting to me as like an adult. And I feel like if I would have played Duke Nukem 3D for like the first time at like this age, like it could have been similar. I don't know, but
I had a similar experience with Borderlands where I was sort of like, this feels like it should be the perfect game for me, but it didn't quite land, and I always felt like the shooting didn't quite feel right. But it is funny that you mentioned Borderlands as having sort of a similar ethos, I guess, if you want to put it that way, because of course Gearbox is the company that revived Duke Nukem Forever, and they didn't quite get it. I think it just didn't quite come together.
I think it's one. I don't know. I feel like Duke Nukem, like other than these new levels were cool, but I feel like it might be stuck for a while, like just in the past, which is probably fine, but part of me, there's part of me that like roots for it, that it can have like maybe almost to compare a somewhat contemporary to Duke Nukem, like maybe someday he could have like a Limp Bizkit style rehabilitation. I feel like they did that recently where they were like, you know what? We're old. The music we made is actually stupid and cheesy, and we are okay with that. We're old men now. We're just trying to have fun.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And you love a couple of our songs. You can't deny it.
Exactly. Like, so maybe Duke could have his moment, but I don't know. You, Jeremy, you mentioned like with just comparing the N64, the blurriness to the crisp PC version. That was actually something you were having sort of an issue. We kind of set ourselves up for failure a little bit. We started playing through the game co-op because we did that with Hexen, and any game where we can play co-op, it's usually like that's a plus for me. Where it's like I would love to play through any game that we've played just together, split screen, whatever. But the game visually already, you had some issues with the.
Yeah, there were a couple times where I was like, everything looks the same right now. Like we'd be in a cavey area and I'd be like, it's all the same color brown. I can't tell where like one wall begins and the other ends.
On top of that, the split screen kind of cut our field of vision a little bit. So it like, and to like, depending on what control style you used, it was a little bit more taxing to like look around, so just the like, I feel like our experience split screen, it wasn't. I went back and I started playing through it a little bit single player, and it was a little bit better, but it does have kind of blurriness.
And I don't want to make it sound like the game looks bad, because I think it looks fantastic. I just think it's not as crisp as the PC version, of course. But I think I think, Ryan, you mentioned earlier that the level design is really good, and I agree. I think it is really good, but it is of its time to a certain degree. So there are some conventions that modern day I was a little bit frustrated a couple of times. Like you're just saying, McKenna, like some of the underground areas when like an explosion happens and you're in a busted up stone area, you can get turned around in a way where you have no idea what direction is up, and it absolutely happens in a few spots.
I do think the single player was a little bit better, but then just in particular when I was playing it, not the 64 version, like just the ability to more like freely look around, because that was an issue like we had in Hexen, right? Where like sometimes the switch or whatever you had to hit would just be like a random texture.
We wouldn't know, where it happened. Yeah. And
that's mostly where we got caught up together in Duke Nukem. But I just noticed like just even like the levels in the non-64 version, like some of the levels or most of the levels are like these really cool design like thing, like it's actually supposed to feel like sort of a real place or something, compared to like Doom where it's a bit more abstract, and that's cool. That's its own sort of thing, you're in hell or like
Los Angeles.
Yeah. Well, I feel like like they didn't often come across as good on 64 because of that sort of thing. Like when I was playing just the regular Duke Nukem 3D, I was like, oh, this is like, this area is this. Like, I really felt like I was in that environment. And I think because we kind of had the weird, like, just visual control thing in 64, it took away from it a little bit. But all around, I still think it's a pretty cool game. And there's, like, a lot of options. Like, I like that you can play it together that way. I feel like that would be more fun, like, if you knew the game a little bit better. You could play through it that way.
I'll say that I think, and I may be wrong, but I believe that sort of co-op style is pretty uncommon in that era. Thinking back, like I don't remember a lot of games that had that mode. It was most of them were either single player or it was some kind of like one-on-one combat. The co-op is somewhat uncommon. To have a first-person shooter that actually runs at a reasonable frame rate on a console that you could co-op is pretty novel at the time, I think. I don't know if I'm not saying it's the first. I'm sure someone else did it first, but the fact that it works, I think, is really impressive. But I will say the one thing that I was a little frustrated with on the gameplay side is that it is not necessarily an easy game. And on PC, you can walk around a corner and just get absolutely blasted by one of the pig cops, and you're done. Sorry. On PC, you could save whenever. Right?
Yes.
That's one of the big benefits of the PC games generally, is you can just save whenever, but you can only save at the start of the level. So you'd spend 15 minutes just to get to the end of the level and get killed and just be like, I'm going to bed. I can't do this again.
Yeah.
Multiplayer, it has a similar thing to Hexen where if one of you dies and the other one's still alive, you can just come back in. The issue we ran into in Hexen was we would run out of like magic, and we could still continue, but we would do like very little damage to enemies, and it was kind of like a war of attrition. In this, you would sometimes need like a jetpack or something like that, but if you died, the jetpack was gone, and it was similar.
we ran into that. I think we were at like basically the end or almost the end.
Yeah,
and we needed a jetpack to cross a gap. And we had both died.
Unless there was another way we didn't know. But.
Yeah. I think you tried. There was one, like, right in that area, but you jumped, got the jetpack, and then just continued falling.
So that was a bit of a hindrance. It reminded me of, like, sometimes in GoldenEye, you fail a mission and you're still kind of playing, and it's like, oh, okay, I gotta, like, leave the level now. It's, like, kind of awkward. So that was a little weird, but
it's just saying to the bad guys, sorry guys, I'll be back later. Let's try this again.
I did like in the remaster thing they have, you can just, when you die, they're like rewind to wherever you want, which that's a little too cool. I'm okay with just the saving, but I guess it was nice to be able to do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I think Doom 64 you could save wherever, I'm pretty sure, right? We didn't play through all those. We played through the whole game.
Remember.
Did we have to like restart levels and we died? I feel like we're not that good. We got through it somehow.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember.
Okay.
I think maybe we had it on like the lowest difficulty, probably. And then the multiplayer made it a little easier.
Doom 64 doesn't have it at all. That was what Doom 64 didn't have multiplayer.
Did it not?
Yeah, that's what was crazy about that. Is I feel like it would be the perfect game too. But, well, whatever. That did make it slightly annoying, like having to restart the level. Definitely other games, but not more annoying than like GoldenEye. So I don't want to knock it too much for that, because we were pretty forgiving of GoldenEye for that. So, yeah. Overall, I'd say it was pretty. Like I said, just seeing those like unique environments, like it did stand out to me. Like that was kind of the charm of the game, is that it felt like a world, and it felt like you were playing a character, as you guys had mentioned. So, and it seems like, even though there was the blurriness, it seems like a decent port. I was looking at the other ports, and it seemed like there were different issues with different ones. Even this one, I guess, had its own unique ones. I noticed there were no mirrors, so you couldn't tell if you looked good. There's no music.
Duke always.
Damn. I can't tell if I'm looking good.
The no music wasn't too bad.
Yeah.
You can kind of
I don't remember the
music.
I don't remember the music in the PC version being particularly notable outside of the title theme. So that didn't really bother me at all, to be honest.
I saw what version? Was it the PlayStation version that has like techno or something playing?
Oh God.
I think it's the PlayStation version has like totally unique, just like dance music that plays the whole time. Which
that would
crazy.
be on brand for a PlayStation game in the late 90s.
The one that
club kids.
The one that does appeal to me, was it? Which was it on Saturn or?
I think it was on Saturn. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Andrew shared his copy, I think, over on Blue Sky.
Yeah.
And that one I saw you can remap the buttons, which I would kind of like, because the controls here, they either let you do Turok mode or GoldenEye mode. But both, since there's like extra items and like the looking is kind of weird, I felt like some sort of like Doom 64 had this, where you could like change what the buttons do, and you could kind of like, I was able to find something that was like a middle ground between the both, because neither of those control schemes are necessarily perfect for this. Like if you go GoldenEye mode, you can, I think, move around and look better, but I can't remember. One of them, like, they map look up and down to the D-pad, and
that's the GoldenEye mode, I think.
Yeah, and so for a while it was
with the stick.
That's got to be right, because I think I did that for a while because it felt more familiar. Like GoldenEye feels pretty good to me, but I eventually switched to Turok mode, even though they invert the aim like in Turok, because I found it, like, compared to like Doom, even with like auto aim, like I wanted to look up and shoot at enemies more often, because they'd have like guys riding the bikes or the jetpacks, and so I switched to that, but that wasn't perfect, so it was a little wonky, but both you could get your way through. It wasn't like the worst.
I did want to mention the controls a little bit. Like you're saying, neither of the modes is perfect. For me, the Turok mode worked better, but using the items was still kind of a pain. And what I found myself doing was, because you'd flip between the items with the D-pad, and then you hit the L button, which is not easy to do when you're holding the controller. So a lot of times what I'd do is I'd have it set to like the health pack, and then if I needed health in the middle of a firefight, I would just mash the controller against my leg to hit the L button. Because there's in the middle of trying to aim and everything, there's no elegant way to do that. And that's a little bit, but I was thinking about it, I at this point in my life, I just really struggle to play first-person shooters on consoles because I'm so used to the keyboard and mouse. It is. I know console people hear this all the time, but it is just infinitely superior. It just is. Once you get the hang of it,
it's both
you can't
true,
go
but
back.
I just don't play games on my PC ever really, other than like strategy games and stuff. So
yeah,
I guess I could get a setup for whatever, but I'm okay.
It was funny to me because in my head I was like, keyboard and mouse is better, but then I thought back and I was like, they didn't have keyboard and mouse look like they have now. I was using the arrow keys to move Duke Nukem around.
It wasn't until Quake. Yeah.
I was pushing page up, page down to look up and down, like
Quake.
So awkward. So awkward. And in fact, at the time, the 64 controller mapping was like infinitely superior to the keyboard. So
it is fun, like as we're talking about all these first person shooters from the point of view mostly of the N64 as we go through it, but like meanwhile on the PC, like a lot of stuff is already like way advancing further. Like I'm pretty sure Quake is already out at this point.
Quake was 96, so it would have been out.
Yeah.
I think it was 96. Maybe it was 97.
96 or 97.
It came out after Duke Nukem. I know that much.
But we're not going to talk about Quake for a while, so
yeah, that got an interesting N64 port.
Ooh, yeah, that's exciting.
Yeah, no, it was 96. You were right. I did want to just continue talking about some of the differences between this game and the original, because I was playing the Anniversary Collection on Steam, so I was in preparation for this, I was kind of going back and forth, playing like a level on 64, and then like playing like the same level on Steam, which I did for like the first few, which was pretty cool. But just a few fun things I picked out about the differences, and this is just straight from the Duke Nukem wiki.
Shout out.
Which I believe was this was maybe the first time I've been on that wiki, but it is exhaustive. So just so you know, but here's
the best of the internet.
Here's one thing. In Duke Nukem 64, captive women can be freed from alien pods, a feature that did not exist in Duke Nukem 3D. Alongside the number of enemies killed and secrets found, the total number of babes saved during a level is now displayed on the level end screen after hitting the exit button.
I liked that change. I liked saving the babes.
Because in the PC version, as I'm sure you guys all know, you couldn't save them. If you walked up to them and interacted, they would croak out, "Kill me," and the only thing you could do was shoot them, which is really gruesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a wild... it's not great.
So I do like saving the babes, but I also really like the kill me thing, because I love the alien vibes that this game has going with the the incubators and the like face hugger guys, and like this is when in Alien, when they're all wrapped up, they're just they're telling you to kill them in the movie, and I was like, oh, this is just like that.
And when you did vibes. Those like guys with like the floating brains would like appear and attack you and stuff, and there was always like kind of like interesting like lore, I guess, when you think about that, like, oh, they're like these guys are like incubating the babes or something. Like I was trying to figure out the alien hierarchy, but there was a certain satisfaction to hitting a button and seeing babe saved. I felt like
babe saved.
I felt like I was making a difference,
It's funny from a more academic, critical perspective. It is concerning that the only interaction you could have in the PC version was to either watch them dance for your visual pleasure or shoot them. And in the PC or the N64 version, you kind of have a step up, but not really, because you're saving them, but then you just see a number. You don't see them like, oh, thank you, you saved me.
Yeah, where's the babe respected option?
Totally.
Have a
Duke
sweater.
Nukem,
Yeah,
Duke
you look.
Nukem help the babe go back to community college. Like
Hey, baby, you look cold. Here's a sweater.
Yeah,
So
I think it's safe to say that women do not have much agency in
Yeah.
Duke Nukem 3D. Yeah. Yep.
that leaves room for them to do like the modern like Duke Nukem has a daughter,
Oh, can you imagine Reddit?
Oh God, the gritty reboot.
Yeah, Elon Musk would have something to say about this.
concerning. What?
Okay.
Yeah, you had some other differences.
I have some other changes. Level 1, the red light district has been renamed Gun Crazy.
Much better,
And-
right?
Has been
Yeah.
significantly altered to satisfy Nintendo's adult content standards. The level gets its name from the fact that the pornography store has been converted to a gun store, which is just the most American thing ever.
Absolutely.
That's true. But if you go in the back, they still have the peep show booths, and they're still showing like women in thongs and stuff. It's just now they're also holding guns, which is also deeply concerning.
That's better. No, that's weird though. That even like, because the whole story. Miyamoto wanted them to like shake hands with everyone you kill in GoldenEye. I know, like they probably didn't have as much control over this game, right? But like, it still seems like something like odd that they would be okay with. But
Gosh, now that you're saying that, I'm imagining Miyamoto like seeing this and just like shaking his head sadly and being depressed all evening thinking about it, and that's not good.
But the N64 is the transition console for Nintendo in like gradually becoming more quote unquote mature. Because, I mean, one of the final games on the N64, which this podcast will get to in like 40 years, is Conker's Bad Fur Day.
Yes.
Which the whole thing is, it's just like the most like vulgar game, like on any platform at the time, pretty much.
I have
until
a copy
like
of
GTA
that,
3.
and I absolutely loved it at the time, and I am really afraid to try and go back and play it for that reason.
Yeah. Probably has not aged well, but it's also kind of like similar to Duke in a lot of ways because it is like so full of like pop culture references and movie stuff. One more kind of fun change that I saw in the game, which I didn't find when I was playing, but apparently in level 2 at the end of this tunnel there is another secret area containing the mangled corpse of Snake Plissken, Kurt Russell's character from Escape from New York and Escape from LA, which prompts Duke to say, I guess he didn't escape from LA.
Yeah.
I think Escape from LA came out in 96 or 97, so it would have been extremely timely.
That was one where it's like, it's a little much. Like, quick rewrite would just, I think if he just said, I guess he didn't escape, right? Wouldn't that be better?
Yeah.
But I think it's on brand for Duke Nukem, the character, to be like, from LA. Get it?
Really oversell the joke and kind of ruin it.
Yeah, true. There are, I think it's not in 60, I think 3D has in general like a bunch of like hidden movie characters, right? Like we were
just watching like an Easter egg compilation. It's got Doom Guy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I remember that.
I think both have Doom Guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, he says that was one doomed space marine.
That one worked a little better.
Yeah, that's better, I think. Luke Skywalker is in there.
Indiana Jones.
Oh yeah, Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fun. That's fun to do.
Which I did get to the Indiana Jones secret area in my playthrough of the 64 version, and I picked up the health item on the pedestal and did not even think about the movie, and a giant stone ball crushed me and killed me.
Yeah.
Wow, that's yeah. We didn't get to any like the secret levels or anything, but it was weird because some of them were like levels in the normal game, so that was kind of weird. Like Duke Burger was a secret level on N64, but
yeah,
that's kind of weird.
They mixed up the level progression a little bit, and some of them were kept in, some of them were out, some were secret in one and not the other, and I assumed that was due to technical limitations, but now that I think about it more, I don't know why they did that.
It was kind of weird in general, too, that it was just like one long campaign. Like, I feel like it would have been better if they were just like, yeah, here's the different, like, because the other ones sort of, they didn't really have like a story arc, but I felt like I got the flow between levels a little bit better, and they would try to have that in here, like, we're locking you up, Duke, and then you'd be in, like, the jail or whatever, but I oftentimes was like, what's, like, not that I needed to know what's happening, but it was a bit strange, whereas I felt like each of them having their own sort of thematic pack of levels was more preferable to me. But yeah, I don't know. One other difference I think I saw is the final boss in Duke Nukem 64 is like fully polygonal and not like a sprite like in the original game.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I don't know if they were just
it looks pretty cool.
We've got the polygons, we can do this.
Yeah, oh, and that final boss fight does have another change. I think the original was in a football stadium.
Yeah, because he punts the head.
Yeah, and then this one, he's in space. They like enclosed. It's still a football stadium, but it's in outer space and it's enclosed. And I assume that was a technical thing, that changing that up made it easier to run the frame rate at an appropriate level. It's kind of a weird, subtle change.
Another thing too that kind of took away from the vibe slightly is like the actual Duke Nukem 3D, like space and stuff, has these really cool sky boxes with like the planets and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Duke Nukem 64 is just black, you know. It's like it wasn't the worst, but you know, it just is. It has like one vibe point stripped away from it, I think, just via the changes, you know. But I think it was pretty successful still, and like the fact that it runs decent and everything, and like,
oh yeah.
I don't know. I think it's still an overall, like, I think I'm pretty impressed with what they pulled out of it, even though it had its shortcomings, you know. I would probably always rather play the other version, but
I do think that for either version, I think the visual design is strong enough that it works really well. I think the enemies, pretty much all of them, look pretty cool. Like, they're fun to see. Like, they have their own unique visual thing going. They're interesting. They don't really look like anything in other games for the most part. You know, of course, the LARD Pig Cops is fun.
Yes, pretty iconic.
And then I think, you know, the overall level design has sort of its own unique visual look that I can't think of any other games that really look quite like it. I mean, of course, there are other games that use the build engine, but they also kind of did their own thing. So it still stands out. It's very memorable, for me anyway.
The most direct comparison I can sort of think of, and it's like years before, so I don't know if it's fair, but it makes me think of like how in Doom 2 they would have like the Earth levels, and they don't quite look as real, quote unquote, as this, or like as immersive, you know. They're more just like Doom levels, and I think people think of those as weaker, but I mean, I like those alright, but I think Duke Nukem really kind of sells you on its world a little bit better, you know, its levels, I think, in the Earth realm, I guess, of things.
Yeah, it does get a little bit more generic when you start getting into space. It loses a little bit of charm for me, but it's still got a lot of fun, you know, elements here and there, so.
Some cool references, and as Star Trek fans, we liked seeing there's like the Star Trek ship level, there's a warp core, you know, that was kind of cool. But yeah. Oh, and also the guns were slightly different. I thought at first it was like, oh, they took stuff out from the game, but there was like guns in Duke Nukem 64 that weren't in Duke Nukem 3D. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
You kind of had sort of equivalents, but it was odd, like that, like instead of RPG, there would be like a grenade launcher, and I was kind of, I don't know, I'm sure there's a specific reason for that change. Like instead of the chain gun, there's the SMGs. I don't know what it is, but
yeah, I was a little frustrated that the chain gun wasn't in, because that was always a favorite on PC. But this is one of those games though that is like a classic example of I just blew myself up, because so many of those weapons can easily kill you while you're trying, especially with the controls. Flipping between weapons on the D-pad is a little clunky, and so going from like, or if you picked up like the explosive shotgun rounds and you think, oh, I got the shotgun, I'm going to shoot this guy, but he's too close and it blows you up too. That was sometimes a little frustrating, but generally speaking, the weapons are a lot of fun for the most part.
Yeah, I love the Shrinker one. We got some fun out of. It broke the game once, remember? We were playing on a level, the both of us, and we shrank something, and it did the thing where he goes to squish it, and the game just like completely shut off. Too much going on, because you go into like this little...
Yeah, it was like when there were all these like incubators in front of a door.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were just like stomping on a whole bunch of them.
It was too much. The game could not handle it.
Too much deep.
It's been quite a lengthy talk, so thanks you guys for kind of coming on and sticking around for so long. But I guess before we go, is there anything else you wanted to say about Duke Nukem 64, just Duke Nukem in general? Jeremy, if you have got any final words?
I mean, I just, like I said, I was a little bit surprised at how well it held up. And I think if you've not played Duke Nukem 3D before, this is, it might be better to go with the sort of the modern day remaster, the original, but this is not a bad version. This was a lot of fun. So I definitely recommend it, which I don't for all Nintendo 64 games of this era.
Yeah, I think it provides, compared to the different shooters we covered, it has some unique things in there that are, the Duke match, for example. We played a little Duke match. We did, we even did one where we were, hunting the bots together, and trying to... They act in interesting ways, the different AIs or whatever.
It was having trouble with opening a door at one point.
We're trying to listen out, because we just hear... We're just looking around. Where is it?
Oh, and it was switching the light switch on and off a whole bunch.
Yeah, that was the piece of cake one, and we were just hunting it for sport, which was pretty fun. So there was no other game that we could do that yet until we get to Perfect Dark.
The classic, just like Doom and Wolfenstein 3D, walking along a wall and going, trying to find the secret switches.
They even commented that in the developer commentary. They're like, can you imagine having to search around like this in a game now? And they're like, well, some people love that. So they mentioned Doom specifically, Ryan, how about you? Any final Duke thoughts?
Yeah, so I think if you're having a bachelor party and you cannot have a LAN party, which would be, I think, ideal. And maybe in retrospect, I should have just made everyone bring their PCs to a hotel room. But
oh boy.
Yeah, but I think this version is different enough that I would actually recommend it if you are a fan of Duke Nukem 3D, because the differences are so interesting, and I think even more so than some of the other first-person shooters on N64, like the PC ports, where they tried a little bit more to play it straight, like Hexen and Quake and stuff. This one, it is it's a different game. It's based on the PC game, And there is actually, I haven't played this, but I saw this, that there's something called Duke Nukem, which is a PC port of Duke Nukem 64 that exists. And it's a native PC port. I do want to check that out, but what I really wish is that I think some of the best, maybe the best reissues of video games in the past few years have been the Bethesda Doom ports onto modern hardware, and we just got Doom 1 and 2, and they have added all of these mods, and they've made new levels and stuff, and I wish the Duke Nukem Anniversary Edition would kind of get those kinds of updates, because like I said, the new episode is pretty awesome, and I think Quake 1, maybe Quake 2 as well, have the N64 versions were added to those new ports.
That's so
but
cool.
done in
Wow.
the modern engine. Don't quote me on that, but I think it's one or both of those.
Cool.
Yeah, maybe. Or maybe I just dreamt that. I don't know. But yeah, it would be cool if they did something like that with the Anniversary Edition, which is generally extremely awesome, and I highly recommend picking that up, because the commentary alone I think makes it worth it. But yeah, N64, Duke Nukem 64. It's a great name for a video game, for one. But
that's
also fair. It's a great game on PC. It's an interesting game on N64, and I don't know. People should check it out.
McKenna, you haven't played this as a bachelor at all.
No.
But yeah, any final thoughts on your experience with the game?
I think I just want to say this has been a good ep on exploring California.
True. Yeah.
We went to San Francisco. We went to LA.
And in the new level pack, there is a San Francisco level. So there you go. You can go hang out there more if you play the remaster of Duke Nukem. I think we've said all I wanted to say about it. It was a cool game. I think I would recommend if you're similar to us, where you're building out your N64 collection, I think it does provide something slightly different than some of the other first-person shooter games that we've talked about. So yeah, I don't know. I think we'll see. We'll come down on it more. We'll rank it at a later date and see where it slots in. But I don't know. I think it's interesting enough.
Duke Nukem for Nintendo 64 and PlayStation.
Who wants some? Hail to the king, baby.
Jeremy, Ryan, thank you so much for coming on this quite beefy episode that we have here. I really appreciate you giving us your time and everything.
No problem. Had a great time.
Jeremy, do you want to plug anything? Got anything to promote?
Not really. I can't think of anything I have to promote. I don't have any podcasts of my own or anything like that, so listen to the other podcasts and shows that get advertised on here, because they're pretty good.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, that's honorable of you to promote some other shows.
Well, if I had a show, I'd say don't listen to those other ones. Listen to mine.
Yeah, then now you're in competition. I get it, yeah. Ryan, how about you? Anything you want to promote?
Yeah, I'm only going to promote myself. And I have many things to promote, so get ready. I run a couple accounts on Blue Sky. I run the DVD Menus account there, which is just dvdmenus.bsky.social. And then I run Standard Issue Gaming over there, which is defstan480.bsky.social.
Yeah, highly good follow, both of those. Also, I know it was a seasonal thing, but I want to plug your GameCube podcast that we got to be on. Very good show. Homesick at Space World. Great show. I hope it returns next summer. Fingers crossed.
We'll see.
We'll see. I don't want to make you commit to that, but well, cool. It was great to have you again. And I don't want to give away too much, but we'll be talking to you soon. And Jeremy, we'll be talking to you even sooner because I've talked to you about being on our next episode, which we are talking about Aero Fighters Assault. And is this Automobili Lamborghini?
Oh my god.
Yeah, I would say
that is going to be a banger.
The level of quality is maybe not quite at the same level.
I've already played a little, but I played a little bit of one of these games and it gave me a headache, to be honest. So we'll see how that is. But thank you both for coming on. Always a pleasure. Yeah. Thanks everyone for listening. What would Duke Nukem say to? Does he say something like a parting? Does he say like sayonara, mother, or something like that?
God, I'm sure he says something when he kills the final boss, but I can't remember what it is.
For the one, he says, "It's time for me to abort your whole species."
Yeah.
Oof.
That's not an N64 version. And I don't want to say that to any listeners, so just thank you for listening, and goodbye. And as always, we want to give a special thank you to our $5 Millennium Star tier patrons over on our Patreon. So thank you Darren Hupke, Infection Form, Jeremy Aber, Kiefer, Nico Sylvian, Paul aka Quaid, and Underline V. Thank you so much, and if you would like to support us, check us out over at patreon.com/flashback64.
Babe saved 7.
Yes.
Get that crap out of here.